Hello and welcome to Future Squared. Stephen Hawking once said that intelligence is the ability to adapt to change, so let's adapt. My name is Steve Glaveski, and each week I'll bring you conversations with preeminent thought leaders from a variety of fields to help you think in a multidisciplinary way, keep goals in your professional and personal life, and better navigate what is fast becoming a brave, new world. Future Squared is brought to you by Collective Campus, an innovation accelerator that works with organizations to unlock their people's latent potential to create more impact for humanity and lead more fulfilling lives. If you need help driving your organization's innovation strategy, visit collectivecampus.io. And without further ado,
come with me if you want to live.
Sometimes you realize at that point in life that we do end up chasing things that are not true to us and not congruent to us. And at that time, you have to ask yourself the question of, do you want to continue doing this? And at 50 or 70 or 90 or whenever you decide to retire, regret all the years that you couldn't live the life that you wanted to live and try to live it then? Or could you change the trajectory for the coming 2, 3, 4, 5 years and live a life from there on until the end of time, because you will be more congruent to what you really wanted to do.
welcome back to Future Squared for episode number 298. And in today's episode, I bring you Ajit Nawalkha. Ajit came from humble beginnings. Born to a middle-income family in Jaipur, India, he grew up in an extended family of 23 other people under one roof. Space and money were scarce, and so as a little boy, he dreamt of abundance. He made a decision to plant himself where he could grow. From starting as a trainee in a non-profit, he has held various roles, including as CEO of Mindvalley, co-founder of Mindvalley Teach, co-founder of Global Grit Institute, and co-founder of Epic Businesses. He's the author of the best-selling book, The Book of Coaching, and the forthcoming Live Big, the entrepreneur's guide to passion, practicality, and purpose. Expect to learn a lot in this conversation with Ajit, including 1. Ajit's story of triumph over adversity and how he built the confidence he needed to build several multi-million-dollar companies. 2. Mental shifts that can transform your experience of life. And 3. For the entrepreneurs and leaders listening, how to build a team that will want to work with you for 20 years, not just 24 months. With that, I bring you the one and only Ajit Nawalkha. Welcome to the show, Ajit.
I'm excited to be here, Steve.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and you're joining me all the way from sunny Los Angeles, California.
Absolutely. It is not so sunny right now, but it is usually sunny Los Angeles, California. Yeah.
I hope you kept yourself out of trouble during the recent wildfires.
Oh, yeah. I live far away from it, but it was very unfortunate. It was, a lot of my friends got affected and their houses got affected. We don't live on that side of the city, so we were okay, but it was very unfortunate. Yeah, it was. But like all things, this too shall pass, so people can rebuild. But look, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the program. I mean, our audience will be familiar with Mindvalley. They will be familiar with Vishen Lakhiani, but we're not here to talk about Vishen. We're here to talk about you, Ajit. We're here to learn more about your story, your backstory, and what's brought you to where you are today. But before we do that, I'd love to know the 2,000-foot view of who Ajit Nawalkha is. So Ajit Nawalkha in a 2,000-foot view is somebody who wants to love and serve and want to be able to support entrepreneurs to be able to live a more positive, progressive life, to be able to grow our companies, but also not ignore that we are holistic human beings, and just companies, just our purpose is not the end all be all. There is more to life, and to be able to create life that is full of growth and success and prosperity, and also full of experiences and relationship and love and all of that stuff as well. So that's my intent. That's my vision for myself. That's what I am as a person. I see myself as a vessel to enable that.
Yeah, and now you're the founder of Evercoach by Mindvalley, which is basically creating a global school to deliver transformational education, the like of which you speak of. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So I've founded many companies. One of the companies is Evercoach. Evercoach basically works and caters to coaches and trainers and educators. This is basically what we did is we found, and one of the greatest things that happened in my life was trainers and coaches showed up in my life. And when they showed up in my life, they transformed my life. I come from a household of 23 people. I grew up in a house that had 23 other people staying in the same house in a cramped space. And I was able to create the joy and success that I have today in my life, thanks to my coaches and trainers that showed up in my life. But as I was building up Mindvalley, so I was running Mindvalley because the audience is already aware of Mindvalley. I can just share that. I was running the company for a bit, and as I was running the company, I was meeting a lot of coaches, trainers, educators, and I found that as much as they're amazing, soulful, wonderful human beings creating positive change in their clients' lives, they are not able to create a great business around it. They are not able to create consistent results around it. And so I was like, hey, what is it that I can do to support this journey? And that's where Evercoach was born. Evercoach is the platform that allows trainers, coaches, educators to be able to see what's missing in their practice, what is it that is leading them to not be as effective as a coach or not be able to build a business around their coaching practice. And that's really what Evercoach focuses on.
Fantastic. And you've got something like 140,000 coaches and teachers on the platform with over 500 hours of training.
Yes.
Fantastic. So look, I wanted to take a step back. So you mentioned there that you grew up in India, an extended family of 23, living under one roof. At one point, you had to share a bed with your uncle and brother. There just wasn't enough space. Now, I imagine coming out of that type of environment and stepping into, the Western world, that would have been fraught with a lot of challenges, particularly when it comes to, say, confidence and insecurities. So I'd love to tease that out. Coming out of that world, I imagine you had quite a few insecurities about stepping into, say, Los Angeles, for example.
For sure, man. And it's not only, I still feel that I have a little bit of that still left in me. It's not that it's completely gone. It is still a part of me where I feel like I don't belong sometimes. I feel like, okay, maybe I'm definitely overreaching. I am coaching these leaders and educators and people who are leading these multi-million-dollar companies. I run multi-million-dollar companies. I feel like almost I live in a dream because that wasn't my reality. That wasn't something that I was from the lens of that 13, 14, 15-year-old that was on that bed with his uncle and his brother sharing that space and crying his heart out because he didn't have enough space to sleep that night. From the lens of that kid, I couldn't have imagined where I am today. From the lens of that kid, I couldn't have even gotten half of where I am today for that matter. And so there is definitely a lot of insecurity and lack of confidence and I had carried that in weight, like I was overweight because of that a lot. I would hide behind a lot. I would try to avoid a lot of public meetings and I would avoid public speaking, all of those things, because I just didn't feel like I had it in me. I just didn't feel that I was deserving of any of it. And slowly and surely, like I mentioned, it chipped away one step at a time, a little by little. Every time I could make a little bit more progress and a little bit more progress, and somebody else was able to show me the light of my capabilities versus me kind of hiding behind and saying, no, that's not for me. Oh no, I can't have that. And as they helped me chip away and help me show up with a lot more light in the world, I started to gain a lot more confidence. And it's thanks to, like I mentioned, to my trainers and coaches and a ton of education programs and a ton of retreats and a ton of books that I have gone through at this point to be able to go, hey, there is more to me than what I've ever thought. What I was at that age in that reality was just a reflection of my reality. That's not my truth. That's not my honesty. And so I made great progress, I can say, but I will honestly I would be lying if I say it's all over.
Yeah.
I feel I'm still on the path. I'm very early in the game, honestly. And I'm still working towards getting past that and realizing myself more and more every day, realizing what's my potential every day and working towards helping more people realize their potential, honestly, because I know how powerful this can be and how most of us feel that we can't have it. And most of us feel like, oh, no, this is not for me, or this is for that guy or that girl. So that's where I am right now.
Fantastic. And I guess like any, spiritual soul searching journey, you never really truly arrive. It is a matter of constant reflection and improvement every single day. And I think the statistic is that something like 90% of people in leadership positions feel like imposters. So you, me, many other people listening to this definitely aren't alone when it comes to that. And it is a matter of just working to become a little bit better every day. But in your case, in terms of building that confidence, I know you had a trigger moment, I guess, in school where a teacher encouraged you to be a news anchor. I'd love for you to tell that story.
So what happened was in school, so like I shared with you, when I was 13, 14, that's when an instance happened in my life where I was sharing my bed with my brother and my uncle. I didn't have enough space. I cried my heart to sleep. And as I woke up and I looked at my wet pillow, I made that decision that I have to get out of this situation. It was one of those moments where you go, this is the absolute ridiculous that can ever happen. This is the worst you can be in as a state. At least it was in my reality from the place that I was looking at. I'm not saying people not have had worse. People, of course, have had worse. But for me, that was it. That was the moment where I said, I need to change my life. And I was on track to change it by becoming an engineer, because that's what you do in India, or at least at that time. You become an engineer, you become a doctor, or you become an accountant. So I was like, all right, I'm going to be the engineer. And I was studying really hard for it, completely incongruent to what I really wanted to do. I just loved numbers, and I thought that's why I should become an engineer. But that's not how engineering really works. So I was trying to become an engineer. I was studying for it. And one of the mornings, you know how in school sometimes, and at least in our school, I was in an all-boys school. And the school, we would do a morning news. Like it was just the news that you would speak for the day. And I would do the English news version of it. And one of the days in the morning when I spoke the news and I went back into my line, my vice principal stepped back, who was also the English teacher, head of English teachers in our school, and said, Ajit, that was really good. If you want to be, you can be a news anchor. Right. And I was like, OK, I don't know where did that come from. And I thought she says it to everybody. Right. That's what you think. It's just an encouraging teacher and so forth. So I kind of like forgot about it, put it on the rug, that type of situation. But it kept happening for another 1 or 2 times where she would recognize me and go, hey, you could be a news anchor if you choose to be. You could be a news anchor. And as I was going through my engineering story, as I was trying to become an engineer, I realized how incongruent I was with being an engineer. And as much as I didn't understand what my teacher really meant, that I could be a news anchor, because I didn't even understand what a news anchor does and what they make is money. And again, remember, my goal at that time was to get out of that house, right? So I was like, okay, I don't know what she's talking about, but what I'm really picking on this here is saying if you choose to be blank, right? Which basically means if I choose to be something, I can be, right? That's kind of what I picked up, really. I was like, I don't have to choose to be the engineer just because that's what the world says. Right? Or that's what everybody else is doing, because guess what? When everybody else is doing something, well, everybody else is doing that thing. That's the sum of all the average that happens in the world. What is it that is distinguishing? How will I make this progress and get out of this house? Right? Because my urgency was that, and that was my pure motivation around it. So that kind of was the first boost of me saying, hey, I could try to be somebody else, right? And I didn't know at that time what I will be, how I would get there. Will I even get there? Is this just the biggest stupid mistake I'm making as a teenage boy? I didn't know the answers to those questions. What I knew was that I knew I didn't want to be an engineer. That I knew, because I realized that even if I did score well in my exams, I would probably be a really bad one, because I hated it so much, what I was studying. So like, I'm going to be a bad engineer anyways. I'll suffer these years of getting the degree and then suffer after. So I got to figure out something different. And this teacher was kind enough to mentor me post school as well. So she would tell me to come over to her house, and she would guide me on really being able to see the world in a slightly different way. And that early mentorship was key to me deciding that I can, A, quit engineering, and B, I can try to be somebody else.
Yeah. And I think there's something very powerful in what you've said there. And I think, it just aligns with this whole theory that children rise to the expectations we set for them. Yeah. And if we think that they are capable of so much more, then they will bring it. But if we put them down and say, oh, you're stupid, you got that wrong, you failed that test, they're going to start believing that. And ultimately that will manifest itself in their behavior. And it can become a very slippery slope very quickly.
That's true, man, and I have to be so aware of that. I just became a father, so that's
congratulations. I think I did say that on your Instagram, so congratulations. That's fantastic. I guess that brings with it a whole new world of challenges.
It does. It's very exciting, though. It's very, very exciting, super fun, having a great time with him. He's a good kid.
Yeah.
I mean, at 6 weeks, he's a good kid. I'm guessing he'll always be a good kid for me. So
yeah, of course he will. Of course he will. So on incongruence, I think that's worth teasing out because I feel like so many people just go through life playing the cards they were dealt, not really questioning whether or not the job they're doing is the one for them. And they might make okay money, but come the weekend, they want to just forget about it. Come Friday night, Thursday night, they'll be out drinking and everything else, and just forgetting the day. And I guess for me, I mean, I've always conflated happiness with living in accordance with your values. And if what I value is not in aligned with my job, then I'm ultimately going to feel miserable, particularly given that I spend half my time there. I mean, what was it about that incongruence, particularly at a young age, to say that this isn't really what I want to do? I mean, a lot of people don't really have that, self-awareness or enlightenment to really make those decisions at such a young age. What do you think? Why do you think you were different?
I think all of us have the realization somewhere in our heads. It's just we don't take action towards it because we are too scared of what that really means or that looks like, right? So for me at the time when I felt incongruent was not so much about me saying, oh, I know this is not true to me. It was more about me saying, I want to be successful. So it was almost like my fear of losing what was certain was much smaller than my fear of not getting to where I want to get to. Right.
Okay. Yep.
So I was not saying I'm smart and that's why I know this is not going to work out. That was nowhere close. I don't still believe I'm not super smart or anything like that. That's not how I see myself. What I do see is that people who are more scared to not living up to their potential, or at least that's what I feel like now, is that if you're scared to not live up to your potential, you seem to have a greater drive than the fear that you might have with the certainty that you have right now.
Yeah.
Right. So I was just less scared of losing the certainty and more scared that I won't be able to get out of my house, of the house that I was growing up in. And honestly, at that time, that was my big driver. Not anymore, but at that time, I would do anything to say, this is the worst I could be. You can't go worse than this. This is the worst case scenario already that I'm living. What is it that I can do to make this better? And I'm willing to play all games that I have to be able to get out of this.
Yeah.
And so so my drive to get out was way stronger. And that's I think the reason why I made that decision. It was less about knowing that this is the right path for me. That happened later. That those dots, like Steve Jobs once said in his speech, those dots you connect backwards and you go, wow, that was brave. You knew. I didn't. I had no clue what I was doing. I had no idea.
Yeah, we definitely don't see the road presented in front of us with all the signs saying, here's the exit, take this exit. It's not like that. You basically see those red signs once you've already passed them in some way, shape or form. But it's interesting because some of my past guests, for example, I recently interviewed a journalist called Mick Wall, and he worked with a lot of, rock bands throughout the last 4 decades. And some of them had absolutely no plan B. They grew up in socioeconomically disadvantaged areas. It was either become a famous rock star or break your back in a factory somewhere. And he said the thing that kept them going was no plan B. And it sounds like in your case, because you did grow up in this household with 23 people, there wasn't really much to lose, which basically made it much easier for you to then, well, not necessarily easy, but push you towards action. Whereas a lot of people, say in a Western economy, who may already have a decent salary, maybe they're putting their kids through a decent school, they're not really happy at work, but they've got a lot more to lose. I imagine you would have worked with people like that who are unhappy, but have a lot to lose. So how do you advise people like that to take action?
So I'll fast track before I go there. I'll fast track something that is actually about, from that time, it was about, I want to say maybe about 12 or 13 years later. So 12 or 13 years later, I was running Mindvalley. I was CEO of the company, right? So I was about 31 years old. So it's about 3 years ago. I was running Mindvalley as the CEO of the company that we had built, because I was almost 7 years into the company, literally built up from 20 people organization to, in partnership with Vision. Of course, Vision is the founder of the company. I'd co-founded many companies with him in partnership by that time. And built it up, became the CEO. That was my dream job. I was like, I will build this company up and I will become the CEO. I had written it on a piece of paper multiple times, right? So I become the CEO of the company. And, and this is where I want to remind everybody who may be feeling that, oh, they've gotten what they always wanted. And they reach that stride. And we reach that stride and then they realize, oh shit, where did I land up? right? And that happens. That's the people that you're talking about. Hey, I have this job, I hate it, but it pays the bills.
Yep.
Because that was the dream that you were chasing all this while, right? I could pay my bills, I could get that car, I could get that house, I could live with my family, right? That was the dream that we chase, right? The dreams that we chase often are designed by somebody else. And that design is created by the reality that we are hanging out in most of the times, right? Me wanting to be the CEO was me wanting to get the validation of my family that I didn't have to be educated with the highest degrees, the MBA, the engineering, because they didn't understand what I was doing. Finally, that title proved to them that I could run a big organization like Mindvalley. They didn't care if I helped build it. They only cared I had the title. But I chased that as a goal, thinking it was my goal, right? But it wasn't my goal. I was doing it because I wanted to get the validation of the world. And I love Mindvalley. I love it to the core. I'm still partners with the organization. And Evercoach is in partnership with Mindvalley, for that matter, the company that we talked about. But at the same point in time, I knew that it wasn't what I really wanted to do. What I love doing is this. I love coaching companies. I love working with coaches. I love playing with small startups, companies that are under 10 million, to take them to 10 million. That's what I really love to do. But I was working in this big organization at that point, doing multiple 8 figures and running a giant operation of over 150 employees. And I was great at it, but I just hated it, right? And sometimes you realize at that point in life that we do end up chasing things that are not true to us and not congruent to us. And at that time, you have to ask yourself the question of, do you want to continue doing this? And at 50 or 70 or 90 or whenever you decide to retire, regret all the years that you couldn't live the life that you wanted to live and try to live it then? Or could you change the trajectory for the coming 2, 3, 4, 5 years and live a life from there on until the end of time, because you will be more congruent to what you really wanted to do? Right? So you can either sacrifice your life for the next 50 years in hope, or 30 years, depending on how much career you're left with, right? You can either sacrifice all of that juice that you have right now and hope after your retirement, you'll be able to pursue something that you really like. Or you can sacrifice the next 3 or 5, right? And create the life so you never run out of juice then. There is no juice ending, because now you're doing what you really love and you're really passionate about it and you get to do it every day. Those 3 to 5 years is the transition time. I'm not saying quit your job. That would be the worst advice ever, right? So if you're not happy, if you're not fulfilled in doing what you're doing, don't quit everything. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is start to transition. It takes 3 to 5 years to build out something, sometimes lesser. I'm not saying it will always take, but I'm trying to set an expectation so you don't give up too fast, right? Because a lot of people give up just way too early in the game, right?
Yeah.
3 to 5 years it might take for you to really be able to refine what you really like to do, become good at it, and start to put it out in the world and do it part-time and make it a side hustle, make it something that you really, really know that you really love and can do it for the next rest of time, and you really enjoy it and you lose track of time and it's beautiful and magical and so forth. You take that, and in 3 to 5 years, you nurture it, you nurture it, you nurture it, you nurture it to the extent that it becomes your unicorn. And now you can say, hey, I'm going to step out from what I was doing until now that was sucking my soul. I'm going to feed everything to this one unicorn, this golden egg, chicken, whatever you want to call it, golden goose that lays golden eggs. I'm going to nurture this one really, really well here on, so I can continue to create a life of joy and juice and love and freedom of how I want to live my life, right? So that's kind of what would be my suggestion to anybody that is not feeling in alignment with what they're doing. Because and also I want to give a reminder that can happen again and again in your life. It's just stages of life that you will find yourself not feeling congruent to what you're doing, and there is no harm in reinventing yourself.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. And something I'm a big believer in is that if you live your life in accordance with people's opinions, then you will never be rich. Doesn't matter how many zeros you have in your bank account. And it's something that holds a lot of people back. I mean, just yesterday I was on this radio program in the United States called School for Startups, and the host asked me a question about purpose and isn't making money enough? And they were completely convinced that money was enough purpose to keep anybody going. And I thought, well, nobody's going to be on their deathbed at the age of, say, 70, 80, 90, if they're lucky enough to live that long, and say, oh, I wish I would have made more money. But I imagine a lot of people will be saying, oh, wow, I wish I didn't waste my life in a job I hated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's actually researched. There is a whole book around it. I can't recall the name of the lady, but Live Big, the book that I wrote, actually one of the first chapters, among the early chapters, we literally start the book with that research that a lady did about how people are on their deathbed and the regrets are not being able to live a life of purpose, not to live a life where they're passionate about what they do, they love what they do. That's a common scenario.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's very common. And one thing I wanted to touch on the book, but before that, I wanted to close this gap for our audience because we started talking about you living back in India in this household and wanting to make the move and build a better life for yourself. So between building these businesses and becoming, the CEO at Mindvalley and founding Evercoach, I mean, what happened in between India and the rest of the world?
So once I was, so my early teenage years, tried to become an engineer, didn't really like it, decided I'm going to quit the attempt to be an engineer and started to go on a journey to figure out what do I really want in life. Big decision for me at that time, grateful that my parents were there to support me and kind of back me up with a very clear message that we can support you for the next 3 to 4 years, but until then, but after that, you are on your own because we don't have the money to be able to support you beyond that. So I was very grateful for the honesty there. And so I then went out, started doing odd jobs, started to see what the world has to offer, found that I was definitely good at doing things, which sometimes made no sense. Like I was doing event management for one company and wrote job of a typist for another and a designer for another, which made no sense at the time. But all these skills will become highly useful as time will go by. And then I joined a student organization. That student organization opened me up to a world of opportunity that the world has to offer. Remember, I was one kid who was in Jaipur, a small town, didn't have resources, didn't have the cable network, didn't know anything about the outside world. And I figured out, wow, there are people around the world who are not engineers, not doctors, not accountants, brilliant, smart people doing great stuff in their realities. I found that I find these people through this organization. It's called ISEC, and I meet them and I'm interacting with them and I'm just loving the experience because now I get to see the world from a completely different lens, from a lens of people, a lens of kids often who are saying, hey, you just want to be happy, right?
Yeah.
Because these were Europeans and Americans and all these guys who were coming down to India, working in that small town, Jaipur, in different companies and just sharing with us their experiences, their culture. And I was like, dang, that is amazing. I would love to be able to do that. And I wanted to travel. That was where the first time my insight of saying I want to travel and see the world started. A few years out of that organization, I got into a sales role with one of the largest publishing houses in India, did some good sales there, started a company in partnership with them, bombed it completely, like it completely bombed, thanks to Facebook, because we were trying to build a social network as well.
Yeah.
Completely bombed that, and then moved on to call up my friends to say, hey, I've not had a success on my back pocket, but I'm good at doing things. Doing things. There was no clear direction to what things.
Yep.
Doing things. I'm good at that. Would you recommend me to any companies that are in your network? This is, again, people in ISEC, right? Hey, would you recommend to any companies in your network that are working in anything that has to do with the online media? Because I think that's the future. Right? Because I remember I was trying to build a company around that.
Yep.
So I kind of reach out to these guys. One of them is in Malaysia. He sends me a note, hey, there's no big company that I can think of that is in this field, but there's a small company, small startup working out of a bungalow in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, which has some ex-ISECers who have started this company. Ex-ISECers is basically ISEC alumni in a way, right? And so they were like, hey, they have started this company. You want to check them out? That company was Mindvalley. And that's how I got to Mindvalley as an intern about a decade ago now. And that's where my trajectory changed in context of learning about online marketing or learning about personal growth for that matter. Until then, I was learning personal growth, but never formally. I wasn't going to seminars. I wasn't reading books. I was just learning from people teaching me stuff. This was the first time where I was sitting down, I was going through a whole program in a night. You know how binge watching works on Netflix? I binge watched courses at that time. I still do, but at that time it was really, really intense. Yeah. Because I would do like all of weekends where it would just be a law of attraction party or sales writing copywriting party or advertising copy. And I would just do that for the entire weekend. And that would be my weekend. So it was very aggressive learning beginning at that time. And that was my trajectory. And after that, I just started proposing companies, and they became successful after successful after successful. I think it was just that initial round of, and some of them didn't become successful, honestly. Some of them did bomb, but most of them became successful. I'm grateful for that. And here I am.
Yeah, fantastic story. And I guess a big part of that is the serendipity that comes with just putting yourself out there, meeting people, whether it was at ASEC or through other avenues, and that then presents the opportunities. And it's like what people say about genius. Genius is just the opportunity to see. And as you said earlier about Steve Jobs connecting those dots looking backwards, well, you can't connect the dots unless you actually spend that time collecting them up front, whether it's by going out to events or whether it is by running your ad copy parties and sales copy parties and law of attraction parties on the weekend, and just binge watching as many videos as possible and listening to crazy podcasts and audiobooks. Because without the content, without all those dots, you're not going to be able to identify many opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And learning was something that I think coaches, trainers, absolutely, and learning, just books and programs, just devouring them and just going through them again and again, sometimes rereading and re-listening and rewatching again and again and again. I think that was a big differential in this kid's life, like in my life. That's what I mean. Like it was amazing.
Yeah. Were there any really transformational books that you picked up during that time?
Oh, there are so many, man. Like at that time, there was a book from Chet Holmes that was really transformative for me. That was called The Ultimate Sales Machine. Mm-hmm. There is a book called Work the System. These were all business related that were really, really powerful for me. Personal growth wise, The Secret was definitely really powerful for me. Bob Proctor's work was really powerful for me. The 11 Forgotten Laws. He used to have a program called 11 Forgotten Laws, mm-hmm. and he had a program called Science of Getting Rich, which is also a book. That was really transformative for me. Silva Method was really transformative for me. There's so much. I mean, it's just like I've Tony Robbins was really transformative for me. Unleash the Power Within seminar, that was really powerful for me. So much stuff.
Yep, fantastic. Well, we'll add that to the show notes for our listeners. So speaking of books, Ajit, you've got a book coming out called Live Big, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Passion, Practicality and Purpose, which comes out on December 11. And the book espouses a lot of the values that we've been talking about. But what kinds of stuff can we expect to get out of the book?
What I found, Steve, was that most entrepreneurs, as much as we believe that there's this one strategy that will crush the business, like we will grow our business dramatically, mm-hmm. I found a fundamental basic that I've helped a lot of coach companies at this point to grow anywhere from 30% to 200%. I've built my own companies, and I've found the fundamental thing that always is the key reason for the success of an entrepreneur mm-hmm. is when the entrepreneur shifts their own reality, when they start to look at the world in marginally or significantly different way. And when they start to look at the world differently, strategies come to them, because there's never a strategy that you can copy and it'll work for you. It just doesn't work that way. There might be a strategy that you would study, and then you will read another one and make a mix of it, and that would work for your business. But no copy of a strategy has ever worked for any company. At least in my experience, I haven't seen one, right? What does work is how and what the entrepreneur is looking at, and how are they looking at it? And can we shift the lens that they're looking at it, that particular thing? For example, in the book, we discuss something that we call the time challenge. The time challenge really gives the idea of entrepreneurs thinking it's all about the hustle. It's all about 18-hour days and working more and getting the extra time by working the weekend. Where we argue by saying, no, you don't have to hustle. That's not how businesses are built. That's not how companies are built. Companies are actually built by people who give themselves time to come up with creative ideas. Creativity is not generated when you are slogging in front of a computer. Creativity comes to you when you have the time and space for your brain to get into the default mode and then be able to extract an idea and position it back to the world, right? Or come out in the world, right? Yep. So we argue with ideas like that, and we give systems on how to really find that time. Because people go, oh, yes, that's a great idea, but how do I find time? I'm working so hard. I need to do this, and this. And what we have found is most of the time, people have no time because they are reactive to time, not proactive to time. Mm-hmm. And we talk about a whole concept of 4x4 principle, the principle that I use for my own work. And we have tested with many entrepreneurs to be able to get more results out of less amount of time that they invest in the business. right? The second principle, there's so many, like you said, there's 25 different perspectives. It's not a big book to read. It's something that is a desk side note, and we give you a 21-day program free with the book that will allow you to be able to reset your reality. So that is coming as a bonus with the book as you get the book, because we wanted you to also be able to go through a program in case you wanted to follow up on the book, right? So, but anyways, another idea that we discuss in the book, which could be profound right now in the conversation that we are having, is what we call the home team principle, right? Most of the people, how do we hire teams? We go, I need this skill, this skill, this skill. And then we hire these skills. And what happens? 6 months later, the people leave us, right? 3 months later, the people leave the company, right? A year later, the people leave the company. What we have found is if you really want to build a business, and if the argument is, I want to build a business, would you want to build it for 6 months? No, you want to build your company. You want to build it for a lifetime. You want to build it for a decade, 2 decades, 5 decades, right? You don't want to build a company that just runs for the next 3 months. Why hire your team members for the next 3 months? Right? And that is what one of the biggest blocker in business growth is today, is teams leave. And so we lose talent faster than we can gain talent. Right? And that's where you want to understand how to really build a home team, a team that will last you not 3 months, but 30 years if you want them to last 30 years. Right? And that's really the presentation that we make, an argument that we make for it, and ideas that we present on it for you to be able to start to design your home team and see how that will unfold in your business and create a business that actually runs by the support of the team, not just by the pull of the entrepreneur, which tends to be the case most of the time.
Yeah. So a couple of things I wanted to double click on there. Firstly, absolutely 100% philosophically aligned with you when it comes to the whole notion that entrepreneurs need to work 16-hour days. I think if you're working a 16-hour day, that just means that you're probably very disorganized. You don't know where you're creating a lot of value. So you're just doing everything on your to-do list. And it was recently where I published something on LinkedIn where I said, hey, we're going to run a 6-hour workday experiment in my team. And someone responded saying, nice theory, but I could never get through all of my tasks in just 6 hours. As if every single task was created equal, and as if you need to do every single task as well. Like you could outsource stuff, you can automate stuff, and Pareto principle: 20% of your tasks is going to create 80% of the value. But it's also become a bit of a badge of honor. Yeah. And I had this conversation with Jason Fried last week, saying people have a badge of honor around being busy, about working late, and not sleeping. But I guess that's one of the mental shifts we need to make. Like that's not a badge of honor. That's just a badge of not having your shit together.
Exactly. And because it's so noisy in the world outside that, oh, you got to hustle, people are forgetting that building a business is, why did you want to build a business? Not because you wanted to work 18-hour days. You built a business because A, you wanted to add value to the world, and B, you wanted free time for yourself. Where is this crazy idea coming from that you should do 18-hour days? God knows, but we have people who are pushing that agenda so hard that people have started to believe that's how successful entrepreneurs actually do their work. Now, I'm not saying don't do hard work. I'm not saying there will be times in your business that you might need to do 18-hour days. But if that's how you structured your business, then that's something fundamentally flawed. And we may want to relook at it and rethink it and restructure it and see what is really valuable. As a side note, for people who are professionals, maybe not entrepreneurs, is you want to ask yourself the question, are you a factory worker or are you an intellectual worker? Now, most of us are intellectual workers, the people who are listening to this conversation right now. If you're an intellectual worker and you have to do 18 hours a day, there's something wrong with the way you're operating. Because in today's time, unless you're working in a factory, that 8-hour days, the concept comes from factories. Because it wasn't about the quality of work you did. It was all about quantity. You had to go through the same mundane task every single day, and that's what you did. Right? And if you're doing that kind of job, it's fine. There is no way out of it because that's more about you actually putting in the hours. And what you need to really question then is what skill are you going to build so you can move on to become an intellectual worker. But if you're an intellectual worker, which is most of the people that is probably listening to this podcast, or if you're an intellectual entrepreneur, which you all are because there's no other type of entrepreneur, why would you want to work 18-hour days? Your power is your intellect. Your power is your creativity. Your power is your ability to think outside the box. You're not going to think outside the box by sitting in a box.
I love that. That's definitely a quotable one. So I guess on that, I mean, You're absolutely right. And I think Dan Pig talks about this in his book Drive, about the science of motivation, and that you have algorithmic work, which is your factory work, just on an assembly line. And then you have heuristic work, which is the intellectual work that you speak of. And the motivational mechanisms for that are totally different. Like money is not enough. You need to have purpose. You need to be constantly learning, and you need to have that autonomy. But also the whole notion of an 18-hour day of intellectual work, that's impossible. Like real intellectual work happens when you are in the zone, when you are in flow. And psychologically, we can only really be in flow. The studies are out on this, which suggest that it's 4 hours, maybe 5 hours of deep work a day if you're really lucky. It's impossible to be in deep work for 18 hours a day. If you were at work for 18 hours a day, it just means that you're just wasting a lot of time.
You're absolutely right. And that's actually something that we discuss in the book. And we show you how you can actually create that deeper space without feeling like you are losing out on companies. And honestly, Steve, I can say this after so much research and after helping so many entrepreneurs, the more we actually reduce the amount of time they actually do the work as entrepreneurs, the faster their companies grow. Yeah. It sounds very counterintuitive, but we've found it across the board that it always works. When the entrepreneur is working less, the company grows more.
Yeah. Well, working less on the right things, I guess.
Yes, of course. That's why you work less, because you're only working on right things and not just everything else. Yeah.
Fantastic. Absolutely love that. On the home team principle, this is something that I would love to unpack, because you did say that it's about building a team of people who will be there for the next, 10, 20, 30 years. Of course, today, Generation Y, Generation Z, even Generation X is characterized by, 18 to 30 month stints at organizations and a lot of hop, skip and jumping throughout their careers. I mean, what kind of things might we want to think about as an entrepreneur or as entrepreneurs when it comes to recruiting people who will be with us for, say, 10 or 20 years?
So firstly, the number comes from large operations most of the time, where the work is usually not purposeful. Usually. Again, I'm not trying to generalize for all our corporations, but that's usually where these numbers come from. That's how long people want to stay at work. No. Actually, the younger generation is more committed, and I belong to millennial generation myself. So I can tell you that this generation is more committed to doing quality work than any generation previous, right? Previous generations can hate on this generation as much as they want, but this generation is just more aware of what they're doing and want to only do quality work. They don't want to do work that's not quality. They don't want to do work that is not purposeful. They don't want to do work where they are not acknowledged and they are not accredited. They are not recognized for what they're doing. They want to do good quality work and they want to get recognition for it. And they're happy to compromise a little bit of pay, not completely. This is also a myth that people think they don't want to get paid. We all want to get paid, but they're happy to compromise a little bit for a little bit better culture or significantly better ethics that comes to workplace. And that's what you really have to think about as an organization that wants to build for years and years and years to come. Do you want to be an organization that follows the turn and burn and the churn and burn of employees, or you want to create an organization where you are brothers and sisters in a way, or friends that in a way doesn't have to be friends where we are showing each other our dirty laundry or anything like that, but friendships, like authentic, nice friendships where we say, hey, we are here doing this common goal, this common purpose, this common vision of a greater humanity, of a greater thing that we are creating. And I'm going to add value to you while we get there. And you're going to add value to this company while we get there. Right? So we are all winning in this dialogue. But this dialogue is so unheard of. We are not talking about these dialogues. We are not checking in as to what is the goal of that employee that just joined the organization. Are we even telling them, hey, let's sit down. Let's talk about how do we help you meet your 10-year goals, 5-year goals, 3-year goals? Are we having that conversation beyond the HR department? Right? We are not. And that's why your team wants to leave you every 16 months or 18 months or 12 months or 6 months or whatever the timeline is. The reason is not because they just like skipping jobs. Nobody likes skipping jobs. Like, it's a pain in the ass, right? Who wants to just find another job all the time? They want to make progress. That's what they want to do. And they skip jobs because they think that's how they'll make progress. Can you offer progress within your organization? The answer is yes, if you are interested in giving them that opportunity. Your organization, as it evolves, has opportunities for everyone, right? You can invite them into it, or you can let them go and find somebody new, which is more expensive to you, right? So my invitation in Home Team, the principle of Home Team, follows that you want to always involve your organization, people in your organization, to having a long-term vision with you. You want to align with their goals. You want to align with their intentions and see how you play out a role to be able to support them in achieving their goals and their journeys and their desires in life. And then you want to see how does that fit into your own organization. And sometimes what will happen is there will be a phase that they will have to go through, right? There will be a phase where they will be like, hey, I have invested 4 years of my life with you, right? But I feel like I'm getting stagnant because I'm learning only from you or from within the organization. I'm not getting any unique experience, and they need to go, and that's okay. But here is the caveat: when you create somebody or you work with somebody where they have a long-term vision with you, they might go work somewhere else. They will come back.
Yeah.
It's almost like a hero's journey. And I'm not just saying this as a philosophical idea. I've seen this happen repeatedly in my own career. Is if I'm invested in the growth of my team member, they might go away. They might work for other companies. They might learn from other companies. They always come back. They come back as partners. They come back as employees again. They come back as people who want to become consultants or people who are just working as freelancers with our company. But they always come back. And when they come back even more powerful than they left, because they went out, they have the alignment with you, they still have their vision of their life. Now you brought them in with added skills that you didn't have on your team. So hurrah, you win twice as much.
No, that's absolutely right. And, I guess the reason why you see so many millennials skipping, and I am a millennial myself, is because many of them are in the corporate world where you might work really hard, and at the end of the year, you might get like a 5% pay rise or a 10% pay rise if you're lucky. And oftentimes it comes back to what we were talking about at the start of the show, where the number one thing they value in some cases is, and this is not true of all millennials, definitely not. I think many of them, if not the majority, are driven by purpose. But if you're just driven by money, then you're just going to be at the mercy of the organization you're working with and how much they can pay you. And if they're going to give you a 10% pay rise, you're like, well, stuff this, I'm going to go work somewhere else and get a 30% increment off the bat. And so that's what we see a lot of people doing, because they are oftentimes driven just by the dollar rather than by that purpose, or at least that's what they've been led to believe. But absolutely love what you said there. And, I've been building an organization that's about 4 years in now. We're just under 10 people, and about 8 of those 10 have been there from day one. And one thing that we do, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, it's just not just checking in when they first join the organization and finding out what their goals are, but checking in regularly, informal conversations, building. Even though Netflix's Reed Hastings says we're a sports team, not a family, I'd say we're probably more of a family than a sports team. But it is really all about checking in on a monthly basis, making sure that they're learning, they're growing, any challenges they're having, any grievances they're having are dealt with. And that way they're more likely to, even if they leave, come back, because they'll realize that very few organizations operate like that.
That's absolutely right, Steve. And I'm 100% in alignment with you. I completely agree. That's one of the big mistakes that leaders do, is not check in with their team members. They don't check in to see, hey, where are we going? How are we getting there? Every quarter, every couple of days, like checking in, appreciating, recognizing the work of people is more important to people than anything else, right? And I do understand that people quit sometimes because they want to make more money and so forth. Yep. But again, people always realize after a little bit that they go, hey, yes, I could make a little bit more money, but that thing that I did there was so much more beautiful. Maybe I will go back to that. And that's fine. Sometimes they need to go out to be able to recognize that. And on the comment on Reed Hastings, and I think it was his HR manager who wrote a book, I can't remember the name of the book, where this was mentioned, we're more of a sports team than a family. I actually don't agree with that. Yeah. I think what happens is there's a point where, yes, you're a family, and there's a point where you become so big that you can't be a family anymore, right? And so you start treating each other as sports team, and nothing wrong with that. But you got to understand and recognize that there is a stage of business that requires that kind of attitude, right? The reason why at a stage you want to think your company as a sports team is because if you would make everybody family, it'll become impossible for you personally to operate, right? It will become impossible for the CEO and the leaders to be able to operate, because they would be so in trenches with each of the employees of the company, and they're just too many to be able to do that. And then people will start to feel, and if you don't get involved equally with all employees, the team those employees might feel, oh, they don't care about me, right? So you got to start going, oh, okay, I can't really treat everybody like family now. So I got to find another way or another metaphor to be able to recognize everyone in a different way that still serves the purpose. So it's not, if you really ask them, if their core group, like their board of advisors or their core team that they first hired that are still with them, their key people, they are like family. They're hanging out. There's no way that they are treated like a sports team. But everybody else is treated like a sports team because it's kind of impossible to not be able to be able to treat them like family at that size of a company. But at the size of 10, at the size of 20, treat them like family.
Definitely. Well, I guess it's the same as our own families. I mean, if you've got an extended family of 100 people, chances are you're not going to see the majority of them, but your immediate family, your first cousins, your second cousins, maybe you'll see them more often and you'll treat them like family. I guess it's just, the law of how many relationships you can actually manage, which I believe is called Brooks' Law. But anyway, we won't digress and start talking Brooks' Law. One thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up with the lightning round, Ajit, was around productivity and not so much productivity, but decision-making techniques. Now, in your role at Evercoach and in your past roles heading up organizations, as a leader, you have to make a lot of tough decisions. Oftentimes, you will bring in the team and work with them to make a decision, but sometimes you need to make the decision yourself. I'd love to tease out what your approach to decision making looks like, particularly irreversible decisions, as Jeff Bezos says.
So it depends on what is the decision what is the situation that I have to make a decision for. For example, if it's a pure business decision, I have a system for it. It's called LERR, which is leverage, ease, risk, and return. I would evaluate all opportunities based on these 4 factors, and based on how they rank for each of these factors, I'll be able to easily judge which one is the one that I will go for first versus another one. So this also happens when you have multiple ideas coming into your life. Then you go, okay, that's the one that I want to go for first, right? Yep. So that's kind of is an easy way to really see how to make a business decision, or when you have too many ideas, how to really pick the idea that you want to go with first.
Yeah.
Was that the question that you were asking, really?
Yeah, more or less. And I guess also trying to tease out the reliance on intuition as well, because I know that's something that you've been quite vocal about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And secondly, so that's a system for, let's say you want to create a business decision. But there are a lot of times what will happen in business is that you will have an idea that nobody understands, right? There will be something where you'll be like, I don't really, like everybody else is like, I don't see this working, Steve. I don't see this working. Has this happened to you? It happens with me a lot of times where I'm all gung-ho about an idea and my team's like, we don't get it. Or an external partner is like, I don't get it, right? And they just don't understand. And I don't know why I have so much confidence in that idea, right? And that happens with entrepreneurs sometimes, especially when it's your first product, right? And you can't explain it. And what I've found is that's because of what is known as intuition. I call it intuitive intelligence versus just intuition. Yep. And that's our ability as entrepreneurs and also as high-performing professionals have the same ability, is basically for us to be able to connect unseen dots together to form an original thought that we forget what's the basis of that thought. So think about it like this. When we operate in the world, we are looking at situations all day long, right? Things are happening around us all day long. We are reading stuff. We are talking to people. We are talking to potential clients or actual clients and so forth. And we're collecting a lot of data, right? This data is not in our conscious mind. This is our subconscious, unconscious mind, right? Yep. In our conscious mind is only the thing that we're responding to, but our unconscious is just picking up information. Now, when you give your unconscious the time to be able to process all that information, it connects so many dots that are rather unseen by you or by anybody else. And it just connects all those dots to create an original thought, right? And that thought is often unexplainable because it is a unique idea, a unique perspective where you can't even figure out why you so strongly believe it to work. And that's what I call intuitive intelligence. And it usually comes through when you're in a state of meditation or doing something that is very mundane and boring, something that allows your subconscious to really be able to process a lot of these insights that have been given to it. And then it creates an original thought. And that's really what intuitive intelligence is about. And I think entrepreneurs that are highly successful operate from a place of intuitive intelligence, especially when it comes to making decisions that are different. Like, think about a company being differentiated. What is the product suite looking like? How will it look like? How are we treating clients? How is our marketing looking like? All these things that are so differentiated as companies or companies that show up with very much differentiation around these ideas are usually operating from intuitive intelligence. The entrepreneurs are operating from intuitive intelligence is what I believe.
Yeah. So just going back to something we started on, which was connecting dots or collecting the dots, I've always believed that intuition can be relied upon if you have that experience, if you have collected a lot of dots in your time. Whereas sometimes if you're trying to make a decision about something you've never dealt with before and you haven't really collected the dots, can you rely on your intuition in those cases?
Yes and no. It really depends on what you're really talking about. So often yes. Sometimes no. So often, yes, in the scenario where it is still related to business, you probably can still rely on your intuition because you don't know where the dots are and you will never know. So you have to rely on your intuition because you will sometimes know, just know, like in quotes, you will know. Yeah. All right. Where else if it's about finding directions in Bali when you've never been to Bali? No, don't rely on your intuition. Go to Google Maps. So it depends on what we are really talking about, right? So if it is something that you have been doing for a bit and you have to make a decision about, you can rely on your intuition to a great degree. But if you've never been to a particular place, then no.
Yeah, no, and that makes perfect sense because sometimes people will say, believe your intuition for absolutely every decision. And I don't think if it comes to finding directions in Bali and you've never been there before, like you said, perhaps not a good time to be relying on your intuition. So, Ajit, you've been an awesome guest. You've left our audience with a lot of value and a lot of inspiration as well, I'd like to think. But before we wrap up, I'd love to throw you into our 3-question lightning round, kicking off with question number 1, which is, if you could work for any other organization at any stage of the company lifecycle, who would it be and why?
I would do either early stage Google or early stage Apple.
And why?
The reason, because I feel like those companies were really relentless. They were like really crazy. I'd love to be in that vicinity of Larry Page and Sergey Brin and Steve Jobs at the time.
Yeah. Well, based on what I've learned about you, Ajit, I think you'd be right at home in that craziness and relentless pursuit. So question number 2 is, if you could ask anyone a question, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you ask?
I don't know. Maybe Steve Jobs, and I would ask why was he so driven and what was the visions he had on LSD in India?
Yep.
Probably.
Did he go, was it to Goa that he went for the LSD? I'm not sure exactly where.
I think it was like Varanasi or something. Right. He went to the northern side is what I would think. Yeah. Because he went to spiritual places which are either on the north, definitely not Goa. Goa is a party place.
Yeah. Well, we're 3 minutes out, so we haven't got too much time to talk about psychedelics. So I'll just give you question number 3, which is really all about your how you manage your time, how you stay on top of your game, what rituals and routines you have. I imagine, you meditate, you take care of yourself physically. What does your day-to-day sort of ritual and routine look like? Especially now that you've got a young son, 6 weeks old, 6 weeks young, I should say, joining the family, which is obviously going to maybe disrupt your sleep patterns, your exercise routine. What are you going to do to stay on top of your game going forward?
Well, as of now, it hasn't disrupted too much, but meditation, definitely workout, bulletproof coffee in the morning, supplements that fuel my body. I only work 4 hours a day for 4 days a week. So that and rest of a lot of fun time with my wife and my kid. Those are all my routines. Like they're everyday activities that I do are these for sure.
Perfect. Absolutely love it. So people can find out more about yourself over at ajitnawalkha.com. So that's AJITNAWALKHA, but that will be in the show notes anyway. So I don't know what I'm spelling it out for, but anyways, you're on Twitter. You're on Twitter at Ajitna and on Instagram at Ajit Nawalkha. And also,
don't tweet me out on Ajitna though. I am never on Twitter. So Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. That's the place to go.
Fantastic. And of course, they can hit up evercoach.com and find your 2 books over at Amazon. Any parting words of wisdom for our audience, Ajit?
The parting words that I will want to leave you with is remember that you always have a choice. I think a lot of us give up on life and we start to believe that whatever we have got, that's all how life is going to be. And I want to invite you to think about it slightly differently. I want to invite you today to start to think about life not in the context of the next 3 months, but in the context of the next 30 years or 20 years or 10 years, and really look at that as your view and say, hey, in the next 10 years, you definitely have the choice to create the life that you want, or 30 years, you definitely have the choice to create the life that you want, and start working towards it. You will see that life will happen the way you want it to happen much sooner. But giving yourself that chance, giving yourself that ability to make that choice would transform your life. And I invite you to do that today.
Thank you so much, Ajit. Absolutely beautiful. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Hi guys, Steve again. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to receive a weekly email from me, complete with reflections, books I've been reading, words of wisdom, and access to blogs, ebooks, and more that I'm publishing on a regular basis, just leave your details at futuresquared.xyz/subscribe and you'll receive the very next one. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, take a minute to like, share, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. It goes a long way to giving the podcast the exposure it needs so I can continue bringing you guests and conversations of the highest caliber. You can catch me on Twitter at Steve Gliveski and on Instagram at TheSteveGliveski. Until next time.
Hasta la vista, baby.